सर्च कीजिए तो अभी एक बार सर्च कीजिए गूगल पे जाइए तो अभी हो गया।
ओके,
ठीक है, हाँ।
स्टॉप करने की जरूरी नहीं है सर। So, hi, good evening, students. Sorry for the delay. There was some technical glitch.
Hi, good evening, students. Sorry for the delay. There was
Again, very sorry for the delay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the GDC classes. Welcome to the session. In this session, we will discuss the respiratory system. Okay, we will discuss the anatomy and physiology of respiratory system. Now, let us start the session. So, let us start the session. So, what is the need of respiratory system in our body? So, when we inhale air along with the air, along with some different gases, we also expire the oxygen, which is the major oxygen required for our body. So, when we inspire the oxygen is utilized for different physiological processes in our body. So the main, the importance of the oxygen is that it is used to produce energy by breaking down different, macromolecules. So macromolecules like the glucose, the lipids, these are broken down in the presence of oxygen to produce ATP. And these ATP molecules, they are used as energy to perform different physiological functions and metabolic reactions in our body in order to keep the body functioning normal. And as a result of these metabolic reactions, CO2, that is carbon dioxide, is produced as a byproduct. And the two primary roles of the respiratory system is that it has to supply oxygen to each and every cell of the body, and the carbon dioxide, which is produced as a byproduct, it has to be eliminated out of the body. So the two major roles is to supply the oxygen and to eliminate the carbon dioxide. So this is the major function of the respiratory system. Now, What happens in the respiration process? We breathe, right? We breathe. That means we inhale and exhale the air. And this breathing, it is considered as a mechanical process. So why the breathing is considered as a mechanical process? When we inhale air, the thoracic capacity, or you can say the volume of the thoracic cavity, it will increase, and when we exhale air, it will decrease. The thoracic cavity volume will decrease. So what are we observing here? There is a difference, or there is some changes in the volumes of thoracic cavity. So that's why the breathing is considered as a mechanical process. Now coming to the respiration, here the story is different. Now the respiration is considered as a biochemical process. Okay, unlike the breathing. What happens in respiration? As I told you earlier, in respiration, the oxygen is used to break down the macromolecules to produce the ATP molecules. And the carbon dioxide, which is produced as a result of this chemical reaction, is exhaled out. So, for one glucose molecule in the presence of oxygen, the one glucose molecule will produce around 38 molecules of ATP. So, for all the physiological functions to happen in our body, it requires energy, and this energy can be formed only in the presence of oxygen. And this respiration is often termed as cellular respiration. Why? Because the respiration takes place inside the cells. So here is the chemical reaction. The glucose in the presence of oxygen produces around 38 ATP molecules, and the resulting CO2 is exhaled out of the body. Now let us know about the respiratory rate. It is the number of breaths a person takes per minute, and the normal respiratory rate of an average adult is around 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Okay, per minute, an average adult breathes for about 12 to 20 times. But this respiratory rate, it is not constant. Okay, whenever a person is suffering from any illness or any disease, this breath rate will differ. So, for example, in conditions like fever, TB, pneumonia, asthma, the respiratory rate may differ. It can change. And these pneumonia, asthma, tuberculosis, these are the illnesses of the lungs particularly. And in these conditions, the lungs are severely affected. And due to this, the respiratory rate can change very drastically. And a common example which I can give you is that when a person workouts or when a person exercises, his muscles are involved, right? So the muscles will do much work, and for the muscles to do the work, it needs some energy. And how the energy will be produced? It is in the presence of oxygen. So during exercise, more oxygen will be required so that more energy can be produced to the muscles. So when a person is exercising, he will observe a change in his breathing rate, and the breathing can go up to 30 to 40 to 60 breaths per minute in case of exercise. And let us know the different muscles involved in respiration. So there are three different muscles involved in respiration: the diaphragm, the external and internal intercostal muscles, and the abdominal muscles. So let us talk about the diaphragm first. So this diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscle which separates the abdominal cavity from the thoracic cavity. And let us know what happens to this diaphragm during expiration and inspiration. During inspiration, the diaphragm will contract, and as a result, the thoracic cavity volume will increase. So here, when we inspire air, the diaphragm is a dome-shaped organ. So here, it will be like this. It will be dome-shaped. But when we inspire air, it becomes flat. Here in the picture, you can see. So the diaphragm will become flat. And likewise, when we expire air, the diaphragm will relax and it will return to its original position. So that is about the diaphragm. And during expiration, the diaphragm will return to its original position. It will become dome shaped, and the air present in the lungs will be expelled out of the body or the lungs. Now, coming to the external and internal intercostal muscles. So, these are the muscles which are present between the bones of the rib cage, or also they surround the bones of the rib cage. So, these here also. So, these are the external and internal intercostal muscles. So when we inspire air, these muscles will contract, increasing the size of the thoracic cavity. And when we, expire, these muscles will relax, decreasing the volume of the thoracic cavity. So these muscles are directly, they will connect the ribcage bones. So they will directly influence the thoracic cavity volume. And coming to the abdominal muscles, the abdominis muscles. So during expiration, these abdominal muscles will contract and they will push the diaphragm towards upward sides, and thereby the air present in the lungs will be expelled out of the lungs. So that is about the different muscles involved in respiration process: the diaphragm, the external and the internal intercostal muscles, and the abdominal muscles. Now let us know the mechanism of respiration. Now this inspiration, it is the simultaneous contraction of external intercostal muscles and the diaphragm. So during inspiration, the external intercostal muscles and the diaphragm will contract. This will elevate the ribs, increasing the anterior-posterior diameter of the chest cavity. So anterior-posterior means the anterior side and the posterior side, the chest cavity size will increase. And this process, the inspiration is an active process, which means that for inspiration of air, we require energy. And the inspiration lasts for about 2 seconds. And coming to the expiration, in this, the external intercostal muscles and the diaphragm will relax, and it will push the resulting in the downward movement of the rib cage. So during expiration the rib cage will expand, and during expiration the rib cage will come towards the down position, so it will not, it will flatten. And expiration is a passive process, it doesn't require any energy, and it lasts for about 3 seconds. It lasts for about 3 seconds. Now let us come to the respiratory tract. So, what is the respiratory tract? It is the pathway through which the air will pass to inside and outside of the lungs. Let us know the different parts of the respiratory tract. So, it starts from the nose and ends at the lungs. So, from the nose, the other one is the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and the lungs. Now, the nose, starting from the nose to the larynx, it is known as the upper respiratory tract, and from the trachea to the lungs, it is known as the lower respiratory tract. So, here, this is the nasal cavity, the nose, the larynx here, the trachea, the bronchi, which are present inside the lungs, and ultimately the lungs. Now, the respiratory tract, it is divided into two zones, the conducting zone and the respiratory zone. What is the conducting zone? So, in the conducting zone provides a pathway for the air to travel inside and outside of the lungs. And also, the conducting zone will help in filtering, warming, moisturing, and also providing a passage for the air to travel. And what constitutes the conducting zone? It starts from the nose and ends at the bronchi. Okay, from the nose to bronchi constitutes the conducting zone. Now the respiratory zone. It is the zone where the exchange of gases will take place. Okay, gases means oxygen will enter into the blood circulation and carbon dioxide will enter into the alveoli of the lungs. So this exchange of the gases is known as will occur in the respiratory zone, that is in the lungs. Now, let us discuss in detail about each part of the respiratory tract. And nose is the external one, and nose is divided into two parts, the external one and the internal one. Let us know about the external one first. So, it is the part that protrudes out from the face. So, the part which is visible to us, it is the nose, and it constitutes two external openings, which are known as external nostrils or external nares. And what is the function? So through these nostrils we will inhale and exhale the air. And the nose is supported by a framework of bones, hyaline cartilage, and it is supported with the muscle, the skin, and inside it is lined with the mucous membrane. So these are the things which will provide a structural framework to the bones. And also in the external nose hairs are present, and these are present at the entrance of the nasal cavity, and they are covered with mucus. So this mucus is a sticky substance which will help in trapping any dust molecules or any bacteria or any pollen which may enter in the body through the air. And what when these hair when the hair traps the dust molecules, tiny clumps of dust will be formed, which are known as goobers. And now the internal nose. Internal nose constitutes the nasal cavity. So this internal nose is a large cavity which is inferior to the nasal bone and superior to the soft palate. So here, this is the nasal bone, the yellow colored one. This is the nasal bone, and the nasal cavity is present below this nasal bone. And also, it is the nasal cavity is present superior. That means above the soft palate. Okay, it is present above the soft palate and inferior to the nasal bone. And the nasal cavity inside it is lined with the mucous membrane. And this mucous membrane contains mucus secreting cells. And as I told you earlier, this mucus is a sticky substance which will help in trapping the dust particles. And also the mucus contains an enzyme called lysozyme. So this enzyme, you might have heard about this enzyme. So this enzyme will help in killing the bacteria, which may enter the body along with the air. And the nasal cavity is separated into two by a septum. Okay, the nasal cavity is separated into two chambers by a septum, and the septum is made up of the hyaline cartilage. So here, this blue colored one is the hyaline cartilage, the ethmoid bone, and the vomer bone. So the septum is made up of a cartilage called hyaline cartilage and two bones, the ethmoid bone and the vomer bone. So this part here, this is the septum of the nasal cavity. And now, the roof of the nasal cavity is formed by the ethmoid bone. The floor is formed by the maxillary bone and the soft palate. And the laterally also they are covered by the maxilla. Now, the nasal cavity consists of three nasal conchae. These are these nasal conchae are spiral-shaped bones, which will divide the you know which will divide the nasal cavity into three different passages: the superior passage, the middle passage, and the inferior passage. So nasal conchae, they are three types. These nasal conchae are spiral shaped bones, and they are of three types: the superior, middle, and inferior conchae. And these conchae will divide the nasal cavity into three passages. Here you can see these are the conchae, and they will form three passages here. These concave, as they form the passages, they will help in increasing the surface area for the air to travel, and also they will trap the water droplets when we inhale and exhale air. Along with the air, some water droplets will be present in the air. So these concave, they will trap these water droplets. That is about the nasal cavity. Now coming to the paranasal sinuses. The nasal cavity consists of about four sinuses. Okay, these paranasal sinuses are nothing but they are fluid filled spaces. Okay, fluid filled spaces inside the bones that surround the nose. So they are present. They are of four types: frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary. So here you can see this is the frontal sinus. Here the ethmoid, maxillary, and the sphenoid sinus. So these are the fluid filled spaces inside the bones. And what is the function of these sinuses? They will help the inspired air to circulate a bit and to get warm and moist. So when we inhale air, so air will be present in the nose, and also these will circulate in these sinuses so that there will not be any pressure in the nasal cavity. So these sinuses will provide some space to the air to circulate, and also they will try to warm and moist the inhaled air. They also act like tiny echo chambers, and they will try to amplify the sound. So when we speak, okay, they will try to amplify. That means they will try to increase the sound of our voice. And you might have observed when a person suffers from cold, there will be a change in his voice. Why means these sinuses will be filled with fluids, so that's why the air cannot, circulate in these sinuses because of the presence of fluid. And as a result, there will be a change in the voice in the persons suffering from cold. So that is about the paranasal sinuses. Now coming to the pharynx. Now this pharynx is, its length is about 12 to 14 centimeters, and it is a funnel-shaped tube which starts from the internal nares of the nasal cavity and extends up to the larynx. So internal nares means, so these are the external nares, and the other end of the nasal cavity has two openings which open into the pharynx. Those are the internal nares. So the pharynx starts from these internal nares and ends at the larynx. I will show you here. So this is the nasal cavity. It starts from the internal nares and ends at the larynx. And these pharynx, it serves as a common passage for both food and the air. Okay, both food and air will pass through the pharynx. The pharynx is present behind the mouth and the nasal cavity and above the esophagus and the larynx. So this is the mouth and this is the nasal cavity. So behind these two, the pharynx is present. And also the pharynx is present above the esophagus. So here, if you consider, here is the pharynx. Below this, the esophagus will be present, and the pharynx is a skeletal muscle. Okay, which is in our control. So when we try to swallow, these skeletal muscles will try to push the food further into the esophagus, and they are lined inside with mucous membrane. And this mucous membrane of the pharynx is rich in malt. Malt means mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. So what is the function of this lymphoid tissue? It will try to trap the bacteria and it will kill the bacteria. And the pharynx is divided into three regions: the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So here, this is the nasopharynx, which has a connection with the nasal cavity. Oropharynx has a connection with the oral cavity, and at last the laryngopharynx. Now, the nasopharynx is the superior part, and it lies posterior to the nasal cavity and extends up to the soft palate. Nasopharynx has five openings: two internal nares, okay, two internal nares of the nasal cavity, and two openings that leads to the eustachian tube in the ear. So I told you that the nasopharynx has five openings, two internal nares and two openings which leads into the eustachian tubes of the middle ear. So there is a connection between the nasopharynx and the middle ear of the middle ear through the eustachian tube. So why there is a connection means it is to balance the air inside the ear. Okay, it is to balance the air inside the ear. There is a connection between the pharynx and the middle ear, and also an opening, that is the oropharynx. So the nasopharynx opens into the oropharynx. So total, the nasopharynx has five openings, and adenoid or pharyngeal tonsils are present in this nasopharynx. So these are a type of lymphoid tissues. Now let us come to the oropharynx. Since oropharynx is the intermediate portion posterior to the intermediate portion, and it extends from the soft palate to the level of hyoid bone. And as the nasopharynx contains pharyngeal tonsils, these oropharynx contains palatine and lingual tonsils. Okay, you remember the difference. There the adenoid tonsils are present, here the lingual and palatine tonsils are present. And the last portion is the laryngopharynx. It extends from the hyoid bone, so hyoid bone is present here. And it extends from the hyoid bone and opens into the esophagus posteriorly and the larynx anteriorly. So up to the pharynx, the passage for the air and the food is common. And after the pharynx, the air will pass into the larynx and the food will pass into the esophagus. Esophagus is present posteriorly, whereas the larynx is present anteriorly. So that is about the pharynx. Now coming to the larynx. So if we talk about the digestive system, we will discuss the esophagus next. But here as we are talking about the respiratory system, we will go with the larynx. Now this larynx is a hollow tube in the neck region, and it is also called the voice box. And it is located in the middle of anterior to the esophagus. It is a short passage. So compared to the pharynx, the larynx is a short passage, and it connects the pharynx with the trachea, located at the level of third cervical vertebrae to seventh cervical vertebrae. So remember this. And the larynx is made up of different cartilages. Okay, different cartilages: the thyroid cartilage, the cricoid cartilage, epiglottis, arytenoid cartilage, corniculate cartilage, and cuneiform cartilage. So the arytenoid, cuneiform, and the corniculate cartilage, they occur in pairs, whereas the other three, they will occur as singles. Now let us start with the thyroid cartilage. So here you can see, this is the thyroid cartilage. And these are two fused plates that form the anterior wall of the larynx, and they are triangular in shape. So as you can observe, they are triangular in shape. And the thyroid cartilage is connected to the hyoid bone by the thyrohyoid membrane. Now the epiglottis. So this is an important cartilage. So this epiglottis is a small leaf-shaped sheet of elastic cartilage that prevents the entry of food into the windpipe. So here this is the larynx. The epiglottis is present like this. So when the food passes, this epiglottis will cover the larynx so that the food will not enter into the larynx and it will pass into the esophagus, which is present posteriorly. So what is this function? It will prevent the entry of food into the larynx and diverts the food into the esophagus. Now the inferior portion of the epiglottis is attached to the anterior rim of the hyoid and thyroid cartilage. The epiglottis acts as a lid, as I told you, and the epithelial layer. So that is one second. Okay. Now, the mucous membrane of larynx, I have told you earlier, the larynx is also known as voice box. So, why it is known as the voice box, let us know now. The mucous membrane of the larynx forms two pairs of folds, a superior pair called ventricular folds, and these ventricular folds are called false vocal cords, and the inferior pair are true vocal cords. So the inferior superior pair of mucous membrane is called false vocal cords. The inferior ones are true vocal cords, and the space present between the inferior vocal cords is known as 𝘂𝙂𝙎𝙬. So before that, why the superior one are false means these superior ones they are not involved in the voice production. So they are not capable of producing the voice, whereas these inferior vocal cords, that is the true vocal cords, they have the ability to produce sound. So that's why the true and false differentiation. And the space present here also. So these are the vocal cords. Here the space is present, right? This space is known as 𝘂𝙂𝙎𝙬, and these are the true vocal cords. These strap-like structures. These are the true vocal cords. And the contraction of the posterior 𝘂𝙀𝙀𝙀 muscles moves the vocal cords apart. This movement of the vocal cords apart is known as abduction. So here, these vocal cords are moved apart, and this phenomena is known as abduction. So when these are moved apart, when these vocal cords when they move apart, they will produce sound. And when the 𝘂𝙀𝙀𝙀 muscles when they relax, these vocal folds will come together. This phenomena is known as adduction. So that is the difference. When they move apart, voice will be produced. And whenever we try to shout or when we try to speak in a high pitch voice, these 𝘂𝙀𝙀𝙀 cartilage here, these are the arytenoid cartilages, they will contract strongly and they will try to produce some high pitch voice. So that is about the the vocal cords. Now the cricoid cartilage. It is a ring of hyaline cartilage that forms the inferior wall of the larynx. So here I will show you. So this is the cricoid cartilage. This is the cricoid cartilage. Now the next one is the arytenoid cartilage. Okay, arytenoid cartilage. So this is the arytenoid cartilage. It is roughly pyramid in shape, right? And it is present posterior to the larynx. Superior part, that means upwards, but in the back side of the larynx. Now the last cartilage is the corniculate cartilage. So this cartilage is, I will show you here. So this is the cuneiform cartilage, horn shaped. These are horn shaped cartilages. So here, and that is about the cartilages. They are clear, say, six types: thyroid, cricoid, epiglottis, arytenoid, corniculate, and cuneiform. These cartilages will support the larynx. Okay, now let us dive into the trachea. So this trachea is a tubular passage for the air, and it is located anterior to the esophagus, that is to the front of the esophagus, and extends from the larynx and at the fifth level of vertebrae. So this is important. You have to remember this. So the larynx, the trachea, at the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae, it will divide into left and right pulmonary bronchi. So this is very important. This might be asked in the exam. So at what level the bronchi, the trachea is divided into the bronchi. So at the fifth thoracic vertebrae, it is divided into the left and right primary bronchi. And let us know about the layers of the tracheal wall. What tissues will form the wall of the trachea. So the outermost is the adventitia, which is made up of areolar connective tissue. It joins the trachea with the surrounding tissues. And the hyaline cartilage, the trachea is made up of, 16 to 20 rings of hyaline cartilage, and these are C-shaped. Okay, hyaline cartilage constitutes about 60 to 20 incomplete rings which are C-shaped, and these cartilages are stacked one above the other. Okay, and they will support the trachea. These are connected together. So these cartilages, they are connected together by a dense connective tissue, and one part, the I have told you that these cartilages are C-shaped. C-shaped means one part doesn't have the cartilage, and that part is exposed to the esophagus. That means that is present towards the back side, and the other layer is the submucosa, which is an areolar connective tissue consisting of seromucous glands. That means these glands will produce the mucus and some serous fluid. The innermost layer is the mucosa layer, and it consists of pseudostratified columnar epithelium, and it consists of goblet cells. These goblet cells will produce the mucus. So that is about the layers. The outermost layer is the adventitia, then the rings of hyaline cartilage, then the submucosa and the mucosa. Now coming to the bronchi. So this is the bronchial tree. So the trachea at the fifth vertebra level, it will divide into left primary bronchi and right primary bronchi. Then comes the secondary bronchi, then the tertiary bronchi, then the pulmonary bronchioles or the terminal bronchioles, the respiratory bronchioles, alveolar duct, and the alveolar sac. So in the alveolar sac, the exchange of gases will take place. So here you can see this is the primary bronchi, and this is the primary bronchi, this is the secondary bronchi, the blue colored one are the tertiary bronchi, and these small ones are the terminal bronchi which are present inside the lungs. And these terminal bronchi will continue into alveolar sacs, and these alveolar sacs will continue alveolar ducts, and these alveolar ducts will continue into the alveolar sacs. And the larger bronchioles, they will contain ciliated simple columnar epithelial cells, and these cells contain goblet cells. Whereas the smaller bronchioles, they are made up of ciliated cuboidal epithelium, and they do not possess the goblet cells. So remember this differentiation. Larger bronchioles contain the columnar cells, and also they are ciliated, but the goblet cells are not present. The smaller bronchioles have the cuboidal epithelium, cuboidal cells, and also the cilia, but the goblet cells are absent. Now the terminal bronchioles are made up of the non-ciliated cuboidal epithelium. And now the alveoli. Now comes the alveoli, which is a very important part of the respiratory system. So it is a cup-shaped pouch lined with simple squamous epithelial cells and supported by a thin elastic basement membrane. So these alveoli, they are made up of squamous epithelial cells. So why these are made up of squamous epithelial cells? So the squamous epithelial cells are very thin, they are very flat. So that as they are very thin and flat, the diffusion or exchange of the gases can take place easily. Okay, the gases can pass through this squamous epithelium easily. And each alveolar sac contains about two or more alveoli. So this whole is an alveolar sac, and each alveolar sac can contain two or more alveoli. And the alveoli consists of two types of cells, the type 1 alveolar cells and the type 2 alveolar cells. The type 1 alveolar cells consist of the simple squamous epithelial cells, which is continuous with the alveolar wall. So the whole alveoli is made up of the simple squamous epithelial cells, and these cells are involved in exchange of the gases. And the type 2 epithelial cells, these are also known as the septal cells. Okay, septal cells, but they are present in few numbers. Okay, they are not present as much as the squamous cells. They are present in few number, and they are present between these squamous cells, and they are cuboidal in shape. So what is the function? They will secrete the alveoli fluid. Okay, they will secrete some alveolar fluid, and they will help in maintaining the alveoli in moist conditions. So here you can see these cells are the septal cells. They are present between these squamous cells. Okay, and their function is to secrete the alveolar fluid. And the respiratory membrane, it is made up of the alveolar wall and the capillary wall. So here you can see this is the alveolar wall, and surrounding the alveoli, the different blood capillaries are present. So the wall of the capillary and the wall of the alveoli forms the respiratory membrane. Why the name respiratory membrane? Because between these, between the capillary wall and the alveolar wall, the exchange or the diffusion of the gases will take place. So that's why the name, the respiratory membrane. These two walls will constitute the respiratory membrane. And coming to the lungs, the main organ of the respiratory system. So these lungs are paired cone shaped structures made up of elastic tissue, and they are present in the thoracic cavity. And each lung is enclosed by a double layer serous membrane, which is known as a pleural membrane. So the lungs are enclosed in a double layered membrane called pleural membrane. And the pleural membrane, as it is a double membrane, the outer layer is the parietal layer, and the deep layer, that is the layer immediate to that, is the visceral pleura. So the parietal layer, it will lines the thoracic cavity, where the lungs are present, and the visceral layer will cover the lungs. And these pleural membrane, it will produce some fluid which is known as the pleural fluid. Okay, between the parietal layer and the visceral layer, a small place is present called the pleural cavity, and into this pleural cavity, pleural fluid is secreted by the cells present in this membrane. And what is the use or purpose of this pleural cavity? It will prevent the friction between these two membranes during the breathing. So when we inhale and exhale, the lungs will expand and they will reduce in the size. So during this process, there will be some movement between these two membranes, and because of the presence of this fluid, there will not be any friction during these movements. And the lungs, the right and the left lung, so the right lung is divided into three lobes: the superior lobe, middle lobe, and the inferior lobe. And these three lobes, they are divided by two fissures. One is the horizontal fissure, so this is the horizontal fissure, and this is the oblique fissure. So the horizontal fissure and the oblique fissure will divide the right lung into three lobes, whereas the left lung is divided into two lobes by the oblique fissure. Okay, the right lung has three lobes and the left lung has two lobes. And let us know the different sides of the lungs. Okay, the base of the lungs is concave shaped. Okay, here you can see the base of the lungs is concave shaped, and it fits into the convex area of the diaphragm. So this is the diaphragm, which is convex shaped. So this is convex shaped, and the lungs are concave shaped. The base of the lungs are concave shaped, and the apex is a narrow portion. The surface of the lungs facing the ribs constitute the costal surface. So this surface of the lungs, it faces the ribs. We call it as the costal surface. And the mediastinal surface. Here, this is the mediastinal surface. This this is the mediastinal surface, and the mediastinal surface has a hilum. Okay, like the renal hilum, the lungs also have a hilum through which the bronchi, the lymphatic vessels, the blood vessels, and different nerves will exit and emerge out of the lungs. So this is about the different sides: the base, the apex, the coastal surface, and the mediastinal surface. Now let us know the movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out of the respiratory system. Let us know how the gases will move in the respiratory tract. So from the environment, the oxygen will enter through the external nostrils. They will enter into the nasal cavity. From there, they will go to the pharynx, then the trachea, the bronchi. From the bronchi, they will enter into the alveoli. In the alveoli are surrounded by the blood capillaries. So in the alveoli, oxygen-rich air will be present. So the oxygen will enter into the blood circulation, and from the blood circulation, the carbon dioxide will enter into the alveoli. And from there again, the carbon dioxide will enter into the bronchioles, then the bronchi, and then it will be eliminated out of the body. So that is about the pathway of the air or the gas. Now let us know the blood supply, pathway of the blood inside the lungs. So from the right atrium. So the right atrium contains the deoxygenated blood. That means the concentration of the oxygen in this blood is very low. So from the right atrium, the deoxygenated blood will enter into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, it will enter into the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery will send or transport the deoxygenated blood to the lungs. And in the lungs, the deoxygenated blood will be oxygenated. That means the oxygen present in the, or you can say the carbon dioxide present in the deoxygenated blood will enter into the lungs, and the oxygen present in the lungs will enter into the blood. So as a result, the blood will become oxygenated, and this oxygenated blood enters into the veins. So arteries will carry the blood to the lungs, and the veins will carry the blood out of the lungs. So from the pulmonary vein, it will enter into the left atrium, the left ventricle, aorta, arteries, arterioles, and capillaries. So the systemic capillaries. So the pulmonary capillaries, these are the ones. Pulmonary circulation means this is the circulation between the heart and the lungs. Whereas systemic circulation means this is the circulation between the heart and the body tissues. So from the left ventricle, it will it will be transported into the arteries, arterioles, and capillaries. And these capillaries, they will provide the oxygenated blood to different cells of the body. So the oxygenated blood contains oxygen, right? So the body requires oxygen. The oxygenated blood will supply oxygen to each and every cell of the body. So this is how the blood will be circulated, and also the air present in the blood will be circulated in the body. So after the oxygen gets consumed by the tissues, the veins will collect the deoxygenated blood. So the veins will transport this deoxygenated blood to the heart, and from the heart it will enter the lungs. There it will get oxygenated, and from there it will be supplied to different parts of the body. So that is about the pathway of the blood. Now the exchange of gases. In this process of exchange of gases, three steps are involved. One is the pulmonary ventilation, external respiration or pulmonary gas exchange, internal respiration or systemic gas exchange. So let us know about each step. Pulmonary ventilation means it is the entry of oxygen or air into the lungs and exhalation of the air outside of the lungs. So it is nothing but the inhalation and exhalation of the air. That is known as pulmonary ventilation. Now coming to the external respiration. So from it is a diffusion of oxygen from the alveoli of the lungs to the blood in the pulmonary capillaries, and the diffusion of the carbon from the alveoli into the from the blood into the alveoli. So what happens in the external respiration is, so when we inspire air, the air contains the oxygen. So the oxygen present in the alveoli, it will enter into the blood circulation, and the carbon dioxide present in the blood circulation will enter into the alveoli, and then it will be expelled out of the body. And how this diffusion will happen? What is the force that will drive these gases to enter into the blood and come out of the blood. So what is the force? It is nothing but the partial pressure. So the partial pressure of these gases, that is the partial pressure of the oxygen and the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, this will influence the diffusion of the gases between the alveoli and the blood circulation. So when the partial pressure of oxygen is more compared to the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So in the alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is more. So in other terms, you can say that the oxygen concentration in the alveoli will be more. And when the gases, they have a tendency to travel from an area of high pressure to low pressure. So as the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli is more when compared to the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood circulation, the oxygen will travel from the alveoli to the blood circulation. And likewise, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood circulation is high when compared to the pressure in the alveoli. So that's why the CO2 will diffuse from the blood to the alveoli. So they will always diffuse from the high pressure to the low pressure region. So oxygen will diffuse into the blood and carbon dioxide will diffuse from the blood into the alveoli. That is about the external respiration, which will take place between the alveoli, that means between the lungs and the blood circulation. Now the internal respiration, it will take place between the blood circulation and the tissues. Okay, so in the blood capillaries, the oxygen, as the oxygen will in the earlier step, the oxygen is it travels, it enters into the blood circulation. So that the partial pressure in the blood circulation is high now, and in the tissues the partial pressure is less. So that's why the blood will travel from the blood circulation to the tissues. And also, as the tissues, they will utilize the oxygen and they will produce carbon dioxide. The tissues, they will always utilize the oxygen. So so that's why the carbon dioxide also constantly produced. The carbon dioxide produced in the tissues will enter from the tissues into the blood circulation, and from the blood circulation it will enter into the alveoli. So that is the thing here. So the one key point you have to remember is that the gases will travel from an area of high pressure to low pressure. That means they will travel from the alveoli, enter into the blood circulation, then into the tissues. And in the tissues, the oxygen is utilized and carbon dioxide is produced as a byproduct. And this carbon dioxide from the tissues, it will enter into the blood circulation and then into the alveoli and into the atmosphere. So this is how it will happen from the blood circulation into the alveoli and from alveoli into the outside. So these are the different partial pressures. So the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 millimeter of mercury, whereas the carbon dioxide partial pressure is 40 millimeter of mercury in the alveoli. Remember that. Now let us know the different lung capacities and lung volumes. This is very important. These are definitely asked in the Gpat exam. Every year, question from this topic it will come definitely. A definite question will come from this topic. Every year it has been asked from this particular topic. So let us know about the lung volumes and the capacities. So the tidal volume, it is the total amount of air exhaled or inhaled during normal respiration. So when a person is in resting state, so when he respires normally, the amount of air he inspires, the amount of the air he expires is known as the tidal volume. So it is the expiration and inspiration of air during normal conditions or during normal respiration. So the tidal volume is about 500 ml. And now coming to the inspiratory reserve volume, uh, it is the it is the additional volume of air which can be inhaled after inspiration of standard tidal volume. So during resting conditions, we will inspire the air. After the inspiration of this tidal volume, the additional volume of the air that can be inspired after inspiring the tidal volume is known as the inspiratory reserve volume. So this is the additional volume of air that a person can inhale. So it is about 2500 to 3000 ml. Now the expiratory reserve volume. So it is the additional volume which can be expired after the tidal volume is exhaled. So this is also the additional volume. This is about 1200. So always remember the inspiratory volume will always be more than the expiratory volume. Why means we can always, as the inspiration is a active process, it is a energy utilizing process, we can inspire by using energy, we can inspire more amount of oxygen. But whereas in exhalation it is a passive process, right? So that's why the volume exhaled will always be less than the volume inhaled. So when if any question is asked in the exam, you always remember the inspiratory volume will always be greater than the expiratory volume. And now coming to the residual volume. It is the volume of air remaining in the lungs after maximum forceful expiration. So when we forcefully expire, whatever the volume present in the lungs is known as the residual volume. So the volume of the air that is residing in the lungs after a forceful expiration is known as the residual volume. So when we exhale air, not all the oxygen or all the air will not be expelled out of the lungs. Some air will always be present in the lungs. So that is this residual volume. It is around 1100 to 1200 ml. Now the total lung capacity. Okay, total volume of air filled in the lungs after forced inspiration. So when we use our full capacity and our full energy to inspire air, so the amount of air present in the lungs after a full capacity inspiration is known as the lung capacity. That means how much volume that the lung can accommodate. So it is the total of the tidal volume, expiratory reserve volume, inspiratory volume, and the residual volume. And it is about 6000 ml. So the total lung capacity is 6000 ml of air. And now coming to the vital capacity. It is the total volume of air that can be expired after a maximum inhalation or the maximum air that can be breathed after you know forced expiration. So if we inhale forcefully, and what is the volume that we expire after a forceful inspiration, and what is the volume that we can inspire after the forceful expiration. So that is the vital capacity, and it is the total of tidal volume, expiratory reserve volume, and inspiratory reserve volume, and it is about 4800 ml. Now the inspiratory volume, it is the total volume of air that can be inspired. Okay, what is the volume of air which can be inspired, and it is the total of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. It is around 3600. Now the functional residual capacity, total volume of air residing within the lungs after an exhalation process. So I have told you earlier, if we exhale the air, some volume of air will be present in the lungs. So that is this functional residual capacity. This is about 2400 ml. So FRC is expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. So what is the difference between the volumes and the capacities? So capacity means it is the capacity of the lungs. Okay, it is the capacity of the lungs to accommodate that much air. So the lung has the capacity to accommodate about 600 ml of air. But coming to the volume means it is the amount of air which we can inspire, okay, which we can exhale, or which we can inhale. But the capacity is different. It is the lungs capacity, but the volume is it is our capacity to inhale and exhale. So that is the difference between the volume and the capacity. So that is about the respiratory system, students. I think we have completed the class here. I hope that you have understood the topics well, and also try to memorize these lung volumes and lung capacities. Okay, the a question will definitely come from this topic, if not from the other portion of the topic, but from this topic, a question is a short from this topic. Okay, every year a question has been asked. Okay, if you go through the previous papers also, you can definitely see at least a single question from this topic. So you try to memorize the different volumes, the capacities, and also the numbers. Okay, what is the volume of the different volumes, and also the different capacities. Okay, that is about the the respiratory system. Thank you, guys.